Hello, everybody. I'm Robin, and today Antonio and I are going to show you how to remove an old popcorn ceiling and give your space a fresh, updated look. Whether you're looking to update your home or prepare for a new ceiling finish, we'll walk you through each step of the process.
That's right. We'll cover everything from prepping the work area to scraping off the texture, repairing any damage, and refinishing the ceiling. And by the end of this workshop, you'll have the knowledge and confidence to tackle this project by yourself.
We'll also go over the tools and materials you'll need to get the job done safely and efficiently. Plus, we'll share some pro tips to make the process smoother and cleaner.
Absolutely. And remember, safety first, as with any project, but popcorn ceilings installed before the mid 1980s, they might contain asbestos. So it's important to test before starting. Asbestos was commonly used in ceiling textures for its fire resistant and sound absorbing properties, but it can be extremely hazardous when disturbed. Inhaling asbestos fibers can lead to serious health issues, which makes testing all the more necessary and important before any removal.
Now, to show you all an example of asbestos testing, we removed some popcorn ceiling from my house. When removing popcorn ceiling, first put on your personal protective equipment, such as a respirator or N95 mask, gloves, and safety glasses. This will help prevent any exposure to potential fibers. Next, using a putty knife or scraper, carefully remove a small sample of the popcorn texture from an unobtrusive area, such as a corner of the ceiling.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And now we already tested it, so we know that it's safe to
Yeah.
handle. But we went ahead and scraped this piece of popcorn off the ceiling and off the wall,
Mhm.
and we're putting it in a sealable plastic bag for testing. The next step is to place that sample in this special testing kit provided by the certified asbestos lab. Each product has different directions on how to process the test, so just make sure to read carefully all of those manufacturer's instructions included. Be sure to avoid creating excessive dust while you're collecting the sample as well. And once you have your sample, go ahead and find an accredited asbestos testing lab in your area. Many labs offer a mail-in service, and the cost is generally affordable, and the results will typically take anywhere from a few days, give or take, all to process this.
Mhm.
But just remember, this step is really just like extremely important. It's
Right.
non-negotiable
Absolutely.
because it's the only way to know for sure if your ceiling contains asbestos.
Absolutely. Now, if your ceiling tests positive for asbestos, stop immediately. Do not attempt to remove it yourself. Removing asbestos is not a DIY project. Disturbing the asbestos can release harmful particles into the air, where they can remain suspended for hours and pose a health risk to everyone in your home. Professional remediation is required by law in many states, and licensed specialists have the training and equipment needed to safely remove and dispose of asbestos materials. Attempting to remove it yourself can lead to contamination and exposure, putting your family and future occupants at risk. Now, on the other hand, if your test results come back clear and your ceiling does not contain asbestos, you can begin the removal process. At this point, you can proceed with confidence, knowing that your project can move forward safely. Now, before removing a popcorn ceiling, thoroughly prep the room to keep everything clean, organized, and protected. Removing popcorn ceiling texture can create a lot of dust and debris, so taking the time to prepare the space properly will make the job much easier from start to finish. A well-prepared room not only reduces cleanup time, but also prevents damage to your floors, walls, and furniture. Trust me, you'll thank yourself later for putting in the extra effort up front.
Yeah, so first, go ahead and turn off the power at your main electrical
Mhm.
panel. And this is an important safety step as always, as you may need to remove things like a light fixture or something else. And if so, we're going to say place a cap or a wire nut or even electrical tape over any exposed wires.
Mhm.
And if you're removing multiple fixtures, consider adding labels to each area to make reinstallation a little easier later on. Then remove smoke detectors and air vent covers from the ceiling. These are obstacles that will get in the way, and popcorn texture often hides a little bit underneath them, so make sure everything is out of the way before you begin. Removing these items also helps prevent damage from moisture or tools during the scraping process.
Now, next, it's time to clear the room. Remove as much furniture as possible to create a wide open workspace. Removing large pieces like tables, chairs, and bookshelves will give you more freedom to move around without obstructions. It also protects your furniture from accidental damage and excess dust. If you have furniture that's too heavy or bulky to move, make sure you cover it completely with a heavy duty plastic drop cloth or old sheets. Use painter's tape to secure the edges so the covering stays in place. Popcorn ceiling removal can be a wet process, so plastic sheeting will help prevent any water or debris from damaging your furniture.
Yeah, you're spraying water all over. Sometimes it's a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, it is.
But Robin, right now, let's talk a little bit about wall protection.
Okay.
And something that we want is to keep our walls free from water damage and from falling debris. So use that painter's tape to also attach plastic sheeting around the perimeter of the room. Tape it about maybe 6 inches below the ceiling so it can catch any falling texture without obstructing your work area. Just make sure the bottom of the plastic sheeting covers the wall all the way down to the floor.
Yeah.
All right, if you're working alone, start by taping one corner and slowly unroll the sheeting while pressing it into place. But having an extra pair of hands can be a huge help and make a big difference with this type of
Yeah, it makes it so much easier. Okay, so once your walls and furniture are covered, it's time to protect those floors. So lay down a plastic drop cloth or canvas tarp to catch all the falling texture. If you're using plastic, tape it down around the edges so it doesn't shift while you work. That becomes really slippery sometimes, so you want to be careful. It's a good idea to lay a layer of heavy canvas or cardboard over the plastic to prevent any water or tools from damaging it. Now, for hardwood or tile floors, make sure the plastic is secure and free of wrinkles. Again, you don't want to slip on that plastic on your floor. It really can be dangerous while you're moving around on it.
Absolutely. When you're working around, like having a slip or a fall at home, that's actually a big a homeowner's insurance claim is falling off of ladders, trips and falls. So as a DIYer, safety first is always important. Before moving on to the next step, double check that everything is protected. Look around the room to make sure all fixtures are removed, walls are covered, and the floors, they're protected as well. It's much easier to fix any missed spots now than to go ahead and deal with the big mess later on.
Yeah, because that is going to make a big mess.
Yeah, save yourself the time and stress. But before you even think about scraping, it's important to suit up with the right safety gear. Robin talked about it a little bit before, because popcorn ceiling removal, it can get messy, and more importantly, it can release a lot of dust and debris into the air. So if you've got allergies, makes that even more important. So protect your eyes. Put on a pair of safety goggles, preferably ones that seal around your eyes to keep the dust from getting in. Wear that dust mask, or even better, a respirator with a high efficiency particulate filter. This will help you keep from inhaling any fine particles that could cause irritation or long-term health issues. And don't forget your hands. Put on a pair of durable gloves to protect your skin from both water and any rough drywall edges you might come into contact with. Now, for added protection, consider wearing a long-sleeved shirt or even a disposable Tyvek suit. This will help keep dust and damp texture from sticking to your skin and clothes, again, making that cleanup process much easier later on.
Yeah, because it's not difficult, but it is going to make a mess. All right, now that we're all suited up, it's time to start softening the popcorn texture to make it easier to remove. The easiest way to do this is to grab a pump sprayer or a spray bottle and fill it with warm water. Warm water helps loosen the texture more effectively than cold water, making the scraping process much smoother. You want to work in small sections, about 3 to 4 feet at a time. Spray the ceiling lightly but evenly, making sure to dampen the texture without saturating the drywall underneath. You want to apply just enough water so the texture absorbs it, but not so much that the drywall becomes compromised. Let that water sit for about 15 to 20 minutes so it can fully penetrate that popcorn coating. If you're working in a large room, be strategic about which section you spray first. You don't want to dampen too much at once, because if it dries before you get to it, you're just going to have to spray and wait all over again.
Yeah, now once your first section has absorbed that warm water, it's time to start scraping. So take a putty knife or a popcorn ceiling scraper and begin working at about a 45-degree angle. This angle is optimized to help remove the texture effectively while minimizing the risk of damaging that drywall underneath. Apply gentle, even pressure as you work your way across the section, using smooth strokes to scrape the softened texture away. A dedicated popcorn ceiling scraper like Robin was showing can make this process even easier. It's designed and optimized to do this. Some models even come with attachment like this one to catch all of that debris from that popcorn ceiling. You attach different plastics or bags in there.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes the smaller bags like this guy is a little bit better because it won't get as heavy,
Right.
fall off, makes it a little more manageable.
Yeah, so if you've got these old shopping bags, it's just held on by clips, and once you soften it, you scrape the ceiling with this edge, and everything should fall down into that bag, so it's far less mess to clean up on the ground. Now, you'll probably still get some on the ground, but these are a great tool to invest in if you're going to do a lot of popcorn removal.
Yep.
Now, if you only have like one small room or anything like that, you can use any paint scraper that you have,
Right.
the 5-in-1 tool, drywall knives, anything to just scrape that and let it fall down onto that plastic.
Absolutely. Now, little FYI, if you run into a spot where the texture isn't coming off easily, don't try to force it. This could damage that ceiling. So instead, Robin talked about that sprayer, use it again. Spray it with a little more of that warm water and wait a few minutes. Then try scraping again with whatever tool that you're choosing to go with. The key here is patience, right? Because rushing through this step can create more work later on when you have more repairs to put in on that damaged drywall.
Right. Here's the thing, when this starts to scrape off, since it is a coating, it should come off pretty easy. You shouldn't have to really gouge it. There's a lot of times as you're scraping where it just slides right off, right? Your scraper will slide right through it. So just be a little bit cautious. Don't try to dig it out. Use some more water to soften it.
Absolutely.
All right. You also want to be mindful of any areas around light fixtures, vents, or ceiling fans. Now, these spots may have a slightly different texture or thinner covering, so take some extra care not to damage the ceiling in these areas. You may need to switch to a smaller putty knife for a little more precision. Sometimes the end of that drywall gets a little fragile around those openings.
Right. Yeah. Now we're going to continue to work in sections until the entire ceiling is cleared of that popcorn. Just make sure that periodically you're cleaning off that scraper that you're using just to minimize and avoid any buildup, which again, that can make the scraping process a lot more difficult. And as you move through the room, check the drywall underneath just to make sure it's not getting too wet or damaged. Now, after all the texture has been removed, the ceiling will still need some time to dry completely before moving on to the next step. This can take several hours, it can take a little longer, maybe even overnight, depending on factors like the humidity levels within your home. Now, for faster drying, you can do things like open windows, turn on that ceiling fan, or use a dehumidifier to help speed up this process.
Right. Once the ceiling is fully dry, you may notice some uneven spots or small imperfections. Don't worry about those. Those are completely normal. The next step will be to repair and smooth out any damages to ensure a clean, professional-looking finish. But for now, take a step back and appreciate the progress that you've made. You're well on your way to a modern, texture-free ceiling. Even with careful scraping, it's common to find imperfections left behind. Walk around the room and look for small holes, gouges, loose drywall seams, or exposed nail and screw heads. Run your hand over the ceiling to feel for uneven spots. Sometimes issues are easier to feel than they are to see. So pay close attention to corners and areas around those light fixtures, as these tend to be a little bit more delicate and prone to damage during this texture removal. Now, if you notice any areas where the drywall paper has torn, those spots are going to need some special attention. Drywall paper can bubble up if not sealed properly before painting, so addressing it now will help you avoid more work later on.
Yeah, but Robin, now I think we've identified the areas that need to be repaired, so it's time to patch them up using a spackling compound.
Right.
And this material is perfect for filling those small holes, the little dents, or minor gouges. For larger damage, we've talked about this in some other workshops, you want to use maybe drywall or joint compound.
Mm-hmm.
All right, using a putty knife, spread a thin layer of drywall or joint compound over each damaged area. And for holes, for gouges, make sure to press that compound firmly into that gap or that cavity just to ensure a full, even fill.
Mm-hmm.
Scrape away any excess with the edge of your putty knife, leaving a slightly raised surface that can eventually be sanded down once everything is dry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're working on drywall seam or maybe a large crack, you can apply a thin layer of that drywall compound and press the drywall tape over it to kind of keep it nice and solid, secure
Right.
as you're repairing it. Smooth it out with your putty knife and then apply a second coat over the tape to blend it into the surrounding ceiling area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, it goes without being said, but let everything dry.
Yeah, you need time to let it dry.
You got to see what the product instructions are because there are different drying times for different products.
Mm-hmm.
There's even drywall compound that will dry significantly quicker
Mm-hmm.
than your average drywall compound. So
Right.
just take a look and make sure you're following the right directions.
Now, the other thing that we didn't mention is when we do rip that paper on the drywall,
Mhm.
all right, you can't just put drywall compound over that. You actually need to seal that paper
Mhm.
up first, or else it won't stick properly. So if you do have any places where the paper has torn off of a gouge or something, you want to go in first with a primer, right? Or a sealer
Right.
and seal that raw drywall, then go ahead and proceed with the repairs.
Yep. Good call out.
Mhm. Now, once all of those repairs have fully dried, it's time to sand. Lightly sanding the ceiling will smooth out any rough patches and blend the repair seamlessly into the drywall. For this step, we recommend using a fine grit sandpaper, a 120 to 150 grit, and a drywall sander or a sanding sponge. Now, if you're working with a handheld sander, attach an extension pole to make reaching the ceiling easier before you start sanding. And make sure you're wearing that dust mask and goggles, right? You got to protect against that airborne dust. Even if you have a shop vac or dust collection system, this step is going to create a lot of fine particles, okay? Now, as a quick pro tip, if you turn off your HVAC system, it's going to prevent pulling that dust
Oh, yeah.
into the rest of your house. So, while you're doing this sanding part and before you clean it all up, you might want to shut down that HVAC system so you're not getting that sand all the way around the house, okay? You can also try something like wet sanding to minimize the drywall dust. So working in light circular motions, avoid pressing too hard. The goal is to feather the edges of your repairs into the rest of the ceiling. So run your hand over the area periodically to check for smoothness. If you notice any low spots or uneven texture, apply a second thin coat of drywall compound. Let it dry and sand again.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
Great tips. I even use some of those, like with the HVAC
Yeah.
and the wet sanding.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
you
that
were
really,
saying.
just that little damp sanding there helps a lot keep that dust down.
There you go.
Mhm.
Now, once the entire ceiling is smooth, the final step before priming is to remove any remaining dust and residue. A clean surface will help the primer and paint adhere properly. So we're talking about that finish look. And this is going to help prevent what? Future issues like peeling or uneven coverage. So take a damp cloth or a microfiber mop and gently wipe down that entire ceiling area. For best results, rinse that cloth or mop frequently to go ahead and avoid spreading dust around. Or if you have access to a shop vac
Yeah.
with a brush attachment, this can also be a great way to remove some of those fine dust particles quickly. Now at this point, you can also remove any temporary plastic sheeting from the walls and floors if it's become, too dusty or just too much debris, or maybe it got ripped during the project.
Right. And this is also just a great way to clean up as well, because, all of that dust and everything is inside that plastic, hopefully. And, you could kind of just like close it on top of itself and hopefully take it out in one shot there.
Keeps it contained.
Yeah, it keeps it contained if you do that.
Now, if you plan to paint the ceiling immediately after, consider replacing the floor covering to catch any paint drips. So maybe that canvas,
Yeah.
drop cloth, it's a great way to just throw that on there if you haven't used that before.
Right. So with your ceiling fully repaired, sanded, and cleaned, you're ready for the final step. refinishing. Whether you plan to paint or add a new texture, a well-prepared ceiling will give you a professional, polished result. But for now, take a moment to appreciate how far your ceiling has come. You're just one step away from completion.
That's right. Now that the ceiling is fully repaired and it's dry, it's time to do that final finish step.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step is simply to apply a primer.
Mm-hmm.
Priming is crucial because it seals the drywall. Robin mentioned that a little bit before. This is great for any painting project.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is it ensures that your paint coverage is going to be full and completely, it's going to look great. It helps prevent things like flashing where repaired areas will look different
Mm-hmm.
under paint.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before applying the primer, use painter's tape once again along the edges where the ceiling meets the wall. This is to help create a sharp, clean edge and prevents any primer or paint from bleeding onto the wall surface. Press the tape firmly to avoid any gaps where the paint could seep through. Choose a high-quality drywall primer and pour a small amount into a paint tray. Use a roller with a 3/8 inch nap for a smooth, even coverage. Before applying the primer to the ceiling, just roll the paint roller back and forth on the ridged part of the paint tray to remove any of that excess primer. You don't want to load it up too much.
Mm-hmm.
The roller should be loaded evenly, but not dripping. Again, a light, consistent coat is key here to have that professional look and finish.
Mm-hmm.
You can also start by cutting in along the edges with a brush, applying primer where, again, that ceiling meets the wall. Then, similar to before, we're working in small sections, about 3 feet by 3 feet is the goal here.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're rolling on that primer, it's like painting any project. You want to paint in a W or an M motion, and this is to ensure even distribution. Keep a light, steady pressure and avoid, again, overloading that roller to prevent streaks or drips. And allow the primer to dry completely. Drying, again, is key here.
Right.
So follow that manufacturer's instructions, and it's usually about a few hours, but again, it can be different factors here depending on the humidity and temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Also, give a little spot check visually. You can see, are there any uneven spots or patchy areas that got covered? And if needed, go ahead and apply a second coat to go ahead and give it that full cohesive look.
Right.
But it also gives you a maximum adhesion for the finished paint color.
Exactly.
Because once that primer has dried, you can move on to that final finish step.
Right. The most common option is to repaint. But if you want to add a decorative finish or, another texture, this is the perfect time to do it. For a classic clean look, a flat white ceiling paint works best. It helps minimize the imperfections and reflects light evenly. However, if you're feeling creative, consider adding a tinted color to coordinate with your walls or a textured roller finish to give your ceiling a little bit of character. You can do whatever you want up there.
Feeling spicy, right?
Yeah, it's like make it look like the sky. You do whatever you want. It's your ceiling.
And the cool thing is there are different products there. If you did want to do a different type of texture,
Yeah.
you can get those in the spray cans.
Right.
We'll use different tools and techniques to switch it up.
Yeah, it's like the popcorn was kind of the old faithful, but they have other things. They're called knockdowns, right? The orange peel is a real popular one, where it's just a little bit of texture, hides the imperfections, but it's not that bumpy popcorn that falls off all over the place.
You can be an
It's
artist.
not so bad. Yeah, do whatever you want.
All right, now, hey, that's right. Live your life.
Exactly.
Now, once the primer is set and you've chosen your finish,
Mhm.
it's time to start painting.
Mhm.
And just like with priming, same steps. So begin cutting along the edges using a high quality angled brush. This means, again, applying that paint where the ceiling meets the walls before you begin rolling.
Mhm.
And this step, again, it creates a clean border and ensures a smooth transition between the walls and the ceiling.
Next, switch to a paint roller with an extension pole to begin painting in those 3-foot by 3-foot sections, always maintaining a wet edge. This means slightly overlapping your previously painted section while the paint is still wet. In doing this, you're going to avoid those visible lines or patchy coverage,
You're
right?
doing a little blending.
Yeah, it blends it. It kind of self-blends it if you kind of go over those wet edges. Use a steady, even pressure as you roll, moving in long, smooth strokes. A 1/2 inch or 3/8 inch nap roller works best for ceilings, as it holds enough paint to cover effectively without creating too much texture. After the first coat, let it dry completely according to the manufacturer's instructions, usually a couple hours. It'll give you a recoat time. Once that's dry, inspect the ceiling for any missed spots or areas that may need a second coat. Applying 2 coats is highly recommended for a consistent, even finish, especially if you're covering a darker surface or a ceiling with patched areas. You want to make sure you have really good coverage.
Yep.
Mhm.
And after you've completed that second coat, it's time to remove the plastic sheeting and painter's tape from the walls and floor. Now, this is a great time to do while it's drying because the tape comes off easier
Mhm.
before the paint fully dries, and it also gets you a little cleaner edges as well. Just be careful when you're pulling up the tape because what you want to avoid is peeling off any of that, that freshly painted surface. So
Right.
you gotta just kind of be mindful. Sometimes you might need to use a utility knife to kind of scrape it along
Mhm.
and cut it off so it doesn't do that pull action.
Yeah.
A good tip here is to pull also at a 45-degree angle when you're pulling that tape. This is going to give, again, a little cleaner edge,
Mhm.
and it helps protect kind of the integrity of that paint that's beneath it.
Mhm. Now, after the second coat of paint has dried, it's time to clean and reinstall any light fixtures, vents, and smoke detectors that we removed during the prep. Now, speaking of smoke detectors, did you know that they have a life expectancy? They don't last forever. You can't just put one up there and leave it there forever and ever and ever.
I got to go back home then. Did not know that.
Yeah, they really only have a life expectancy of about 10 years, all right? While they're down, go ahead. This is a great opportunity to check that manufacturer date on the back to see if it's time for a replacement. Even if they're still functional, now is the perfect opportunity to replace the batteries, give them a good cleaning, and ensure that they're working properly.
Safety first.
Always.
Now, with everything reinstalled and cleaned up, it's time to move the furniture back into the room and add those final touches.
Mhm.
So take a step back again, admire the work that you're doing, right? And give yourself kudos and
It's a lot.
and a round of applause. This is awesome stuff because you've just completed a full popcorn ceiling removal and refinish. Not
Mhm.
only does your ceiling look fresh and modern, but it adds value to your home.
It really does.
A smooth, updated ceiling makes a huge difference in how that room feels, brightening the space, and it gives it, again, a more polished look and feel.
It does. Now, whether you choose a classic white ceiling or decided to get creative with your color or texture, your space now has a clean, updated look. This project takes some time and effort, but the results are well worth it.
That's right, and voila, there you have it. It's a pretty simple process that goes much smoother with a bit of preparation. Now, let's take some time and go over the tools you'll need for this project. Things like a pump sprayer. Again, huge, huge benefit to soften that texture.
Mm-hmm.
You can also get that popcorn
Oh,
ceiling scraper.
love
We
it.
really think this specialized tool is awesome because it makes removing the texture that much easier, especially with cleanup.
Mhm.
A putty knife helping scrape off that texture. All of the personal protective equipment we
Oh, yeah.
talked about. It's a non-negotiable.
Mm-mm.
So again, great things. Protect yourself, but also protect the space and be safe about it, right? So whether you're using the right ladder,
Mhm.
giving yourself that extension pole, different materials and tools to again make this project safer and easier to use when you're cleaning up.
Absolutely. And remember, we did talk when we are talking safety and tools, we're using those plastic drop cloths and things like that.
Mhm.
And we're using water. So the drop cloth itself is slippery. Plus, you add some water or moisture on top of it, super
Yep.
slippery. So really be cautious when you're getting up and down off of that ladder or step stool, things like that, to really keep yourself safe while you're doing
And
this.
using the right type of footwear.
Right type of footwear. Absolutely. Non-slip would be perfect. Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the materials you'll need to complete this project. Like I just mentioned, plastic sheeting or drop cloths. You want to cover those floors and walls and furniture to catch this debris. Super messy job, right? So you want to be careful of the paint that might drip or overspray,
Yep.
and you just want to prevent those messes. You're definitely going to need a drywall primer. All right. You're going to need a paint primer for underneath your paint, and if there's any paper that has torn on your drywall, that is a different kind of sealer. You're going to need that drywall sealer. Okay, so you kind of need both of those. You're going to really have to get some of that joint compound or spackling compound to fix any of those small little, hopefully small imperfections that you've come up with, okay? Sanding, you want to have some, whatever you choose to sand with, whether it's a pole sander, whether it is a ceiling sander, whatever you have, make sure you're sanding everything smooth before you get started. That makes a really professional finish. That ceiling paint, caulk, if you need it, can be used to seal any small gaps around the edges of the ceilings. You can find all of these tools and materials at your local Home Depot or online. So now, let's answer some of those frequently asked questions, shall we?
Fire away, Robin.
All right. What if my popcorn ceiling contains asbestos? What should I do?
Hey, we talked about this from the beginning because it's the most important, I think, part of this project. So if your ceiling does test positive for asbestos, do not remove it by yourself. Again, we're going to reiterate that this requires professional remediation because asbestos is a hazardous material that can be airborne during removal. It increases the risk of serious health issues, including lung disease like asbestosis or mesothelioma. Instead, we talked about hiring a professional, get somebody who's licensed to deal with asbestos abatement, who has the proper training, the proper equipment to safely contain and dispose of this. All right, professional removal always ensures compliance with local laws and regulations, which typically this can require things like permits or special handling procedures.
Right.
Even if the asbestos is encapsulated, maybe a previous homeowner did that, disturbing this in any capacity can release dangerous particles into your home. So if you have any sneaky suspicion that your ceiling contains asbestos, get it tested first. We showed you the kit. It's a simple, affordable step that can protect you and your family.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you know, it doesn't take much to get it tested. It's very easily. And, you know, asbestos in and of itself, if it doesn't get disturbed, it's not harmful to be in your house. But it is, if you disturb it in any way, that's when it becomes harmful. So, you know, if you have, I mean, don't panic if you're not going to scrape your ceiling that you may have asbestos in your house. But if you're going to disturb it in any way, that's when it becomes dangerous. So that's why you really need to have that professional remediation. They have the ventilation, they have everything they need to keep it safe.
Now, Robin, quick question for you now. How long does this project typically take?
Yeah. So the timeline for removing a popcorn ceiling varies based on the size of your space and the condition of your ceiling. So in general, plan for at least a full day to complete the removal process. Now, for a standard room, scraping can take 3 to 6 hours, but it doesn't include repairs, sanding, priming, or painting. Now, I did a small bathroom recently. And it took me about 2 days, right? It took me a couple of hours to scrape it down. And then I wanted to make sure that it was really, really dry before I went ahead and did any of the priming or anything. So I waited until the next day for the repairs and the priming and the painting. So, you know, you figure a good weekend project, you know, to do this to allow enough time. Now, if your ceiling requires those patching or extensive repairs, that additional drying time for drywall compound can extend the project over multiple days, right? Because that's it. You want to make sure everything is dry. For a whole house ceiling removal, or if you're working with really high ceilings, the job may take several days to complete. So factor in time for cleanup. As you know, the popcorn ceiling removal is a really messy process. I think we kind of mentioned that already. Working methodically and following prep steps like protecting walls and floors will help keep the project manageable and efficient. I think it's also a really good idea if you are planning on remodeling, like if you're planning on putting in new floors and things like that, if you're remodeling a whole room, do the popcorn ceiling removal before the floors, okay? Because that way, if you're going to remove the floors anyway, it doesn't really matter if anything happens.
Yeah, you don't got to protect, you don't have to be as extensive with protecting the floor.
Exactly. So just think about the order that you do things in. All right, so Antonio.
What's up?
Can I go ahead and skip that priming process before I go ahead and repaint?
I know we get this question often too, and you know, some paints have a primer involved in it too. The short answer is no. Skipping primer is not recommended. Priming your ceiling after removal, it's critical because what does it do? It seals the drywall surface. It helps prevent uneven paint absorption, and it minimizes flashing, that look when something looks patched
Right.
in different spots from the rest of the ceiling. Also, primer improves the adhesion of the paint, so this reduces the risk of peeling or streaking over time. If you've had to repair seams, gouges, or holes, a high-quality stain-blocking primer can also help hide some of those imperfections and can prevent water stains or old paint from bleeding through.
Yeah.
So again, skipping primer may save you a little time and money up front, but it can result in headaches and blotchy, uneven finish
Yeah.
down the road, forcing you to apply extra coats of paint just to get the coverage that you want.
Yeah.
Bottom line, always prime before you paint so that you have that professional looking result.
Yeah.
Now let's go over what we've covered today. We showed you how to test for asbestos, how to prepare the room, how to remove the popcorn ceiling, and how to finish it. We hope this workshop gave you the confidence to remove a popcorn ceiling in your home.
If you have any questions, email us at workshopslive@homedepot.com or visit homedepot.com for more how-to guides.
With the right tools and a little patience, you can tackle almost any home improvement project. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next workshop.